First, let's talk about finding and fixing coding errors. Dreamweaver's site reporting features allow you to find problems with links, empty tags, untitled documents, and other errors that are important to fix. When you use the site reporting feature, Dreamweaver will generate a report for you to review. So to do this, you'll first want to make sure all your documents are saved, and then go to Site, Reports. So this is the dialog box that opens. First, under Report On, you would select an option. We want to run it on our current document, so we'll keep that selected. Next, under Select Reports, you'll check off all the different reports that you want to run. So if we wanted to run all these reports, we would then click the Run button. And you can see down here is where we'll get the result. This is the copy of our report, and it will show you any errors or warnings. You can view the errors in your document to fix them using the Property Inspector or another feature. Make sure that you save your file when you're finished. Now you can also test out your site. In earlier versions of Dreamweaver, there was something called Adobe Browser Lab. If you still have that feature, if you're using an older version, then you can use that to test out your web page. But the Adobe Browser Lab is no longer being updated and supported by Adobe and has been deprecated in CS6 and CC. But you can also test your document browsers up here in the document toolbar where it says Preview/Debug in Browser. So you'd simply click on that arrow and then select the browser that you'd like to preview your document in. And that will show you how it looks in there. Now let's talk about setting up the server information for FTP. FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. It sounds like a complicated term, but it's not. It's simply the method you'll use to transfer files from your computer to the web. If you've ever copied a large file from one location on your computer to another, then this won't be totally foreign because FTP does the same thing, except it copies your website files to your website on the internet. All you have to do is set up your FTP with a little information. The information you'll need to set up FTP includes the name of your FTP host, and if you don't know this, contact your web hosting company, your username, and your password. Once you have this information, it's time to set up an FTP server. To do this, you'll go to Site, Manage Sites. You'll choose your site. Our site was example. And then you'll select the edit icon, which looks like a pencil. Next, you'll click on Servers on the left-hand side of the Site Setup dialog box. And then click on the plus sign. You'll enter a name for your server. And then under Connect Using, you'll want to make sure that FTP is what's selected. Then you'll enter the FTP address provided by your hosting company, followed by the username and the password that you use to access your FTP server. After you've added this information, click the Test button to try it out. And if the test is successful, Dreamweaver will tell you. If not, double-check your login information and FTP address. So in our case, because I was just entering made-up information, obviously an error occurred. So if this happens when you input your information, that means that you'll need to recheck what you've added and see where the problem is. After that, you'll enter your root directory and then your website URL, and you'll click Save. Now let's talk about the File Panel options and viewing remote files. The Files panel gives you a quick and easy way to manage and transfer files to and from your remote server. What's more, Dreamweaver can automatically compare your local and remote folders and add and delete files where necessary. So let's take a look at the Files panel and examine the options available to you. To see it, go to Window and Files. And our Files panel opens here, and it shows us everything that we've added to our website. And I'm going to stretch that out here so we can see everything. Notice these two drop-down menus up at the top here. The one on the left is called the Site menu. It allows you to choose a site and view all of the files associated with it. It also gives you access to all of the files on your computer. The drop-down menu on the right is called the Site's Files view. There are 4 options associated with it: Local View, Remote Server, Testing Server, and Repository View. This option allows you to see the files associated with your site in that directory. For instance, if you select Local View, you'll see all the files that reside in the site folder on your computer. Remote View would let you see the files in your remote folder. As you can see here, we've selected the site that we created at the beginning of the course, our example site, and we're looking at all the files that are in our local folder. Now take a look at this button here that looks like a plug. This is called the Connect/Disconnect button. Click it to connect to a remote site. Now what about transferring files to and from a server? Dreamweaver makes transferring files to and from a server a cinch. Take a look at these arrow buttons in the Files panel. The down arrow is called the Get button, and the up arrow is called the Put button. The Get button retrieves files from your remote site, and the Put button transfers files from your computer to your remote site. Now let's talk about getting files from your website. Here in the Files panel, go ahead and select Remote Server. And if you've added that remote server in, Dreamweaver will connect to that automatically for you. Now select the files that you want to copy and click the Get button. And it'll start to download that file for you. Now Dreamweaver will ask you if you'd like to download dependent files. Dependent files are the images and other files that are referenced when a browser loads a document. If the dependent files are not available, the image or other file will not load. A placeholder and an X will appear in its place. If you already have copies of the dependent files in your local folder, then click No. If you're using the check-in/checkout feature, Dreamweaver will retrieve a read-only copy of the file. We'll talk more about the check-in/checkout feature in a moment. Now let's talk about putting files. Putting means to transfer files from your local folder to a remote host or your website. This is done in much the same way as you get files. From the Files panel, you'd select the file that you want to upload, and then click the Put button. And Dreamweaver will automatically transfer the files. Now we also have something called the Synchronize button, and that's this button with the two curved arrows here. The Synchronize button is similar to the Get and Put buttons, except it compares the files on each site and only transfers those that are new or have changed since the last download. To use the Synchronize button, select your site, and then select the specific files or folders that you want Dreamweaver to update. You'd skip this step if you wanted to synchronize all of the files. Then click the Synchronize button. A menu box will open here. Here you can choose which files to synchronize and how to synchronize them. The Synchronize menu lets you choose whether to copy only the selected files, as shown here, or your entire site. There are three options available in the Direction menu. You can choose to put newer files to a remote site, get newer files from a remote site, or both get and put newer files. Click Preview to synchronize the site. Dreamweaver will then compare the files from your remote folder with your local folder. If the newest versions of each file are already in both locations, an alert will let you know and no files will be updated. Otherwise, you'll see a dialog box which shows which files will be updated. So you'll either click OK to update the files or choose one of the other options. The Synchronize button on this screen only marks the selected files as already synchronized. Now let's talk about cloaking a file. Cloaking a file allows you to exclude it from operations that ordinarily affect every file or folder in a site. Furthermore, cloaking can be temporarily disabled if you want an operation to affect every file. To enable cloaking, select a file or folder in the Files pane and right-click on it. Then select Cloaking, Enable Cloaking. If you wanted, you could also go to Cloaking and then go to Settings and enable the cloaking here. Now in this box here, look at the Cloak Files Ending With box. With this box, you can choose to cloak all files of a certain format. So I've got a .fla file and .psd file here. I could cloak all of those file extensions if I wanted to. To cloak an individual file or folder, select it in the Files panel and right-click on it. You go to Cloaking, and then click Enable Cloaking, and a cloaked file will appear with a red line through it in the Files panel. And lastly for this lesson, we're going to talk about using design notes. Design notes are notes that are associated with a specific file but stored separately. Design notes can be used to save extra information associated with a file, such as comments, original file names, and just to keep track of information that isn't included in the document. For instance, you might want to save the formula used to come up with a particular figure. Design notes can be created for each document or template, as well as for each applet, ActiveX control, image, flash movie, shockwave object, and image field in your document. To add a design note to a page, click the File Management button, which is right here, the up and down arrows in the document toolbar, and then click on Design Notes. You can add all your notes right in here. If you want the note to show when the file is open, put a check mark beside the Show When File is Open box. You would just type your notes in the Notes field and click OK.